Hello. Really nice to be here, and looking forward to share the next 40-ish minutes with you. A bit stressful to coming behind all these great speakers, but I think I hope we manage. And there will be some repetition along the way, but repetition is the mother of all learning, right? So I think we can endure. So let's talk about building the ad that you call it behind the screen here. Is actually what our site looked like when we released the Aura ring. We didn't release it when we started selling it in the Nordics. So this, what you see here, is what our page could look like if we were there like a year ago. How many think that looks good for our e-commerce site? Any takers? No. And that was like, it was like this was like 3 seconds. Like the page could stay like this for like 20, 30 seconds. And I mean, dynamic content is fine, but I get to a limit. I would never use dynamic content for prices, the information, etc. That's just not how it should have been done. And just to be clear, I was not part of the team building the site as it was 2 years ago. I was just the team that did the new site. And this really, I mean, we have a really strong commercial department at Elshop. So we still managed to sell a lot because we had really great offers. So customers struggled through this. I'm not sure if I would have, but our customers did. But we did get some really bad, might be hard to see, and it's also in Norwegian, so it doesn't really matter. But it's a horrible site on Reddit. I ended up going somewhere else. And there's another comment. I work at Elshop. The frustration over this horrible site is as big on our end. And as a developer, it is a little bit embarrassing, to be honest. I didn't feel proud when I was talking to other sort of developers not working at the Elshop. Okay, this is not good. Yeah, I know, but I don't work with the Elshop site at the moment. And also when I joined the Elshop 5 years ago, the first comment I got from a friend was, "When will you fix the site?" It took 5 years. It did took 5 years to fix it. It took like 1 year, but get to the position to do it took some years as well. And yes, where we are now, this is from our Speed Insight, which is basically Core Web Vitals, but in the Vercel dashboard. This is for the desktop. I think it was last week. So I think we're doing pretty fine. Mobile is 99, which is also good, I would say. If you don't trust these, we have also the official page speed results. So we're doing good. And just to show exactly what it could look like, I have these recordings from, this is what it looked like over a year ago. You see the spinning thingy when someone clicked. And wait. And then we also have started the next one. This was when we released the first Next.js version. We were still behind a CDN proxy. So you do see some lagging when it comes to image, etc. And the last one here is where we are now with running pure on Vercel and don't have any extra proxy before. And everything is actually much smoother. I will come back to how all this impacted the solution. And this is like show you the experience of how it was to go from the start screen, adding some things to the basket, insurances, etc., and going to the checkout. And I mean, I think we finished there on the last one. So it took like 33 seconds. And this one here is 2 minutes long. And of course, I might have clicked slightly faster on this one than a colleague of mine actually recorded the first two. When we were at that state. But I mean, just right here, we've started looking at this one. He clicked this button 2, 3, 4 times. It's not just interactive, and that's not acceptable by any means. And also, like, going from 2 minutes to 33 seconds, I mean, I didn't, like, speed chopping. I tried to do it, like, pretty calm and in the same manner as he did these two, and it just took much less time. So that is sort of the improvement we have done over the last year or so, I would say. So, quick introduction. I'm Tomas Jansson. I work as a principal software engineer here at Elköp Nordic. Elköp Nordic is the largest retailer in the Nordics. We are probably among the largest in Europe as well, I think, because we are serving 4 countries in the Nordic, and we also have sort of a franchise in Faroe Island, Iceland, Denmark. We don't have the e-commerce site in those countries. We only have the e-commerce site in Denmark, Finland, Sweden, and Norway, of course. We have around like 10,000 employees, and all those employees are also sort of customers because the store employees go to the site. So they are actually they don't go there to buy, but they go there together with our actual customers and show some of the offers sometime. So they are our, in a way, best customer because they can actually tell us what's wrong if something is working. I've been a developer for close to 20 years now, or more than 20 years. I should update the slides. And I started doing like Perl programming a long time ago. Been doing everything from ABAP in SAP to Java, C#, whatever. And now I'm doing front-end at the moment. And I usually don't focus that much on technology, to be honest. I focus on where I think I can make the most impact. And at the moment at Elköp, it is actually just fixing the site. And hopefully we'll be done soon. I also truly believe that like, if you don't continue to change, you will lag behind, especially in our industry. So I do think and challenge the rest of the organization all the time that we always need to change. Of course, you will make a wrong step sometimes, but overall, you're probably moving forward. So I will share a bit also. These are 2 parts of this talk. One is the technical part that will come slide later, but also how do you drive change in a large organization as Elköp? I'm not sure how many here are working for an enterprise. Yeah, then you might feel the pain. I do, at least a lot of the time. So hopefully this might be something that can help you. If you are working for a startup, which I also did like 4 or 5 years before joining Elköp, it is slightly different, but I think these things can be good for you as well. And as a developer, it is hard to be heard when you're working for enterprise organizations sometimes. I mean, of course, you can be heard inside your development department or whatever to some degree, but being able to drive like real change is really hard. Like doing this change, rewriting the whole website, was not an easy decision to make. Our previous site was actually finished like 1.5, 2 years ago. So someone made a not ideal decision 4 years ago, maybe, to write that application in Angular, but we can come back to that later. But like, there was still someone thought that was a good idea, and there was a buy in that, and then I'm coming and saying, okay, we can do this for 1/10 of the price, and it's going to be better, faster, and whatever. And that can be hard to believe. So to be heard in an organization, you need to focus on the problem that you want to solve. As a developer, we like to talk about technology, what's the latest framework, I don't know. But I mean, management, customers, stakeholders, and whatever, they really don't care about the tech we choose. They care about, can we save some money on the cost? Can we get increased revenue? Whatever. So if you can't explain or present a real problem that can actually impact those numbers, you're going to have a hard time to make an impact in a large organization. That's just how it is. And I think this is, it can be tough for sure, but and as long as we do like to talk about tech, and hopefully the tech can align with increased revenue or decreased cost. In our scenario, we focused mainly on decreasing cost, to be honest, even though I hope the revenue impact will be bigger because we have a much better site, but it's much easier to point to cost. At least it was in our case. And you also need to do the math when you're doing this and want to drive the change. Just saying, oh, we have a problem here. Okay, why? I mean, it's a problem. It doesn't work. You have to show them some kind of concrete numbers or whatever and back it up with. And that's also why sort of the business, if you like, are always better to be heard, because they are speaking the language of management and shareholders and whatever. They make a hypothesis and create business cases with, we're going to earn 10 times much more money, which most often is not correct. But they make some assumptions along the way, and that's perfectly fine. We need to do that as well. But we also need to try to validate those assumptions. But if you don't have any sort of idea that, okay, I mean, this will be 10 times more expensive, like who is going to buy into that? So we need to present something that can improve the status quo. So doing the math and have a concrete problem is very important, but it's not enough. I think also you have to start pairing up with other people's and work together with the rest of the organization. To get this one through, I paired up with 3 other people's mainly. 2 other developers, which we sort of hacked together a proof of concept really early on. Just spend some evenings here and there, or while we were waiting for the old site to compile and things like that. So we didn't spend too much time. We definitely made some shortcuts, but we made something work. And also other colleague that really complimented me more towards the business aspect of it, that helped me to put together a presentation and ask sort of critical questions. And it's not just that you're going to pair up and get some more help. It's also to get these first followers. Because without the first followers, if you can't persuade or convince anyone else that this is a good thing, how are you going to convince the management it's a good thing? So you need to have someone that believes in you. And it's also reassuring that someone is believing in you and make things definitely easier. And it also increases your network into the organizations when you have someone that can do it. And ideally, it should be also someone that might not be another developer. So try to find people that believe what you think, that might have another type of reach in the organization. It doesn't have to be larger, but might reach other people in the organization. And when you have this, it's time to tell and show. Put together the business case in a nice presentation, and try to be sort of super focused. Don't go too wide. When we first did this in the first business case slide deck we created, we're going to create the new econ site, we're going to replace CMS, we're going to replace search, and then we realized that replacing CMS and replacing search is too much. So we just replaced the ecom site. Draw a line there. It was quite a lot that as well, but then we could at least be more focused and have, in a way, smaller impact on the organization while driving a large impact on cost. But it's also important to present how you're going to go where you want to go, how you're going to validate all the assumptions that you made when you put together like the business case with numbers. How are you going to go there? That's very important. And in our case, we only sold the idea of give us 2 months, and then we can make a decision after that. And that's not very common when you're working for enterprise, because most of the time, how much is this program going to cost? We're going to run for 2 years, and then we're going to throw it out the window. We said, give us 2 months. That's me and 2 more developers. We had basically, over the summer, almost 2 years ago now, 1.5. And then we spent 2 months then to create what would be like almost 80% of the solution, I would say. But as everyone knows, 20% of the solution take 80% of the time. So we were quite far from the goal, I would say. But we could at least show something concrete that this is the way to go. And and also when we did the presentation to sellers, we already had a really early stage proof of concept, which also was much easier that made it much easier for us to convince the management that this is really the way to go. And I am happy that they listened to us. There will always be some skeptical person saying that timing is bad. I mean, when is timing good? I never been in such a situation. Like, timing would have been good like yesterday or 2 weeks ago, whatever, but I don't have a time traveling machine, and I don't think they have that as well. So timing will always be bad, and I think if you have a good enough, a strong enough business case, it's probably better to start now than to wait. I think that sort of concluded the soft side of how do you drive change in a large organization. And I think that was almost as much learning, to me at least, as the technical part of it, and super sort of fun and scary at the same time. So let's switch gear and move toward the actual solution and what we have done and why we have made the choices we made. So first of all, why use Next.js? I think for a lot of people here that are using Next.js, it might be that it's just cool or a good solution, which I do think it is. But it is good to start think about how can it impact or solve the problem that you have. And when I think about web applications, I think about them in a sort of a spectrum of applications. You have on one side of the spectrum, you have like super static sites, basically like blogs. And then you have super dynamic sites like trading applications, gaming or gambling or things like that. And you need to know where you are in that spectrum to choose the right solutions. And also just choose, like even when you have chosen the right solution, you need to maybe know how to use the tool the right way, depending on what are the characteristics of the problem you're going to solve based on this sort of spectrum. And as I mentioned earlier, we had an old solution in Angular, which in my mind, does not fit an e-commerce site. It's mainly targeting if you want to try to build sort of dynamic desktop-like applications, then Angular might be a good choice. I would still choose React or something else, but that makes more sense at least. But building something that is as static as an e-commerce site, but the e-commerce site is super static. Like, some people would like to argue, though, now our price updates all the time, or stock need to be updated. But it doesn't update. Price on a product updates like a couple of times a day, the most. Stock, especially if you're using stock levels and not exact stock, changes at most 4 times a day. So all these product pages are super static. The only dynamic part of it is sort of search, but it's not dynamic in the sense of a lot of interactivity. It's more dynamic in that we need to generate it on the fly. So having that kind of application that Angular gave us is not going to have any benefit, to be honest. So that's why we chose to go with Next.js, to have the server-side capabilities, which I think is very good. I mean, we could definitely find even more performant solution, but when it comes down to it, it doesn't really matter how fast you're going to render the HTML on the server, because the network traffic will always be like 10 or 100 times slower than the new generation of the HTML, if you do it right. So it doesn't like we would have Golang, it would be even faster. I don't care. So we went with Next.js, focus a lot on being able to generate everything on the server, because that would open up a lot of doors for us. So that was the main choice of why we choose Next.js. So let's go. What did we really learn when we did this? When we first started doing Next.js, and we are also hosting on Vercel, by the way. Vercel had a quite push on running things on the edge. I'm not sure if anyone noticed that. So we went all in. We're going to run everything on edge. And that's going to be awesome. No. It wasn't. I mean, it worked fine when we're doing it locally, I know one or two persons. But when you're doing things on the edge, like really simplify, this is what you have, I would say. You have your client really close to the application, but our backend was not ideal. We have a lot, like, just for our product detail page, we're doing like 10 or 15 API calls. And that distance is very long when you go from the edge to our backend services. So we would much better off pushing everything closer to the services and having a static experience than running on the edge. So when we actually went, I think it was like 3 or 4 days before we put the traffic to 100% to the new site. We made a decision to switch to Vercel functions and static pages instead of running everything on edge. And I think we managed to finish the refactoring like 2 hours before we made the switch. And that was slightly stressful because we had a campaign starting at the same time, but it went fine. You only live once, so yeah. So Edge, but Edge is not like, it's not like Edge is bad. It's not a good fit for that. We still use Edge. Like if you're running on Vercel, Edge middleware is running on Edge, and that's super useful. As long as you don't do a lot of API calls, you're fine. You can do like some in some situations, like if you're going to refresh your access cookie or whatever, then it's fine to make an API call. But don't do that on every single request. If you're only working with the actual request in your Edge runtime or in the middleware, or if you have the data co-located on Edge, then it's fine to run on Edge. But we don't have the data on Edge, so for us it didn't make sense. But we're still using Edge middleware a lot, which I will come back to. Network jumps matters a lot. As I mentioned before, we had a CDN proxy on top of our application for a long time. That was also because our old application had this CDN on top, but there it acted as a CDN and not as a CDN proxy. But having as a CDN proxy, it's not saying that this proxy, I'm not going to say which CDN it was, because that's irrelevant, I think. But having it as a proxy, it sort of acts as something it's not intended to be used. It should be a CDN, not a proxy. And when we actually moved all the traffic directly to Vercel and like not going through the proxy, which we have done now, so we are not behind the proxy, we saw, as you see in the top graph, a 40% improvement when it comes to time to first byte. So being aware of like your network is very important for a performance app, because this time to first byte, the reason I have that metric and not other core vitals metric is because time to first byte basically impact all your other metrics. The faster your request can get back to the client, the faster contentful paint, you have a better IMP, and you have a better larger contentful paint as well. So all metrics actually improved, but I only show 2 here. And look at the context for like historical, you can see it as well here, where we did a switch right before, like in the middle of January, I think, or late January, I think. Apparently it's on the graph, and it was quite a good improvement. So don't have unnecessary network layers. That's not bad for your customers. Or that is bad, I mean, for your customers. So let's talk about some of the features that we like we get from Next.js. It will be not as deep as Auror's talk on React server components, but some of the things, if you haven't done a lot of work with Next.js, it can be helpful to get started. Next.js is very opinionated, and if you don't buy into those opinions, you should not use it. I mean, it's not saying it's good or bad, whatever. There are a lot of really good, awesome frameworks out there. Next.js is one of them. But if you can't like live with those opinions it has, you're probably better off doing something else than fighting the framework. One of those opinions is basically how you structure applications. And the first part, when you start using it, at least when you're doing like this is using Next.js app router, which I think you should default to if you're going to do it at the moment. And there you have like, you use basically folders to structure your routes. And then you have some opinionated name on the file names to define the behavior of the application. Like here you have a layout defining sort of outer shell and then the page that is sort of injected into the layout. And it is I think it's good in two ways. I like it more for the organizational aspect of it. I don't need to think about where I should put the files. Next.js has defined it for me. Some people doesn't like that, and that's perfectly fine. I think it's make it easy for me I don't have to think about it, but that's just how I work. And as a short demo of how it actually works, it also serves a purpose if you are doing client-side navigation with Next.js, because then you don't have to fetch the whole application. So when you see how load the whole application, you see that everything that flashes green is basically what is loaded. But when I do navigation in this application, you can see that everything is sort of very visually stable. So only the part that is actually impacted by this navigation is what gets loaded. And I get this sort of for free just by using the layout and routes. So looking at the code, see if I can find it. Looking at code for this is super easy. We have the demos should be somewhere. Is this the? Where is it? App code demos, yeah. So here we have the layout demo. So I just have this small fading component that's what makes it flash green. And then for everything, I just have a small children. So here in this, where I put in the children, that's basically where my page or for this route will be injected. So when I go to the root, this page here will be injected. If I go to /orders, this other layout will be injected into the layout. So it's a way for me to compose the applications together with different part of different files. And then I can continue on with the pages inside layouts. Yeah. So that's page and layouts. Server component, I'm not going to go as deep as Aurora did because I don't have time. And she knows a lot more than me about it, so I'd have to. But server component is also one of the things I like the most about it. And I think it's also one of the newest or larger changes in the React ecosystem the last couple of years. And to be frank, it's not something super new. A lot of frameworks from PHP to .NET to Java has done server rendering a long time in a good way. But in my opinion, Next.js does it better. I am an old .NET MVP doing .NET development, but I still think that Next.js way where they sort of bridge the client and the server they do the bridge much nicer than we did in the .NET framework days. And if you want to have something server-side in Next.js, that's a default. Like Next.js is a server framework. And the client side of Next.js, that's basically the React part as I see it. I don't think that's a quote anywhere, that's how I see it. But if you want to break out from this server world in Next.js, you define or use the use client directive. And when you do, you basically turn one of these nodes into a client component. And that's perfectly fine. If you have some interactivity, that's what you should do. And it's also important to remember that this client component will have its first render on the server still. So you will get a pretty good user experience. If you do the client component further up the tree, everything below that node will also be a client component. Even if you haven't marked these two blue client component as with the use client directive, they will still be a client component in this context. But there are ways around that to actually create something that looks like this. And that is if the server is passing in the component to the client, they will still be rendered on the server. And that's really important to utilize as much as possible to get a small bundle size as possible. And a really small demo of that is this. Really simplified. I have the outer page, which I call a server page. Then I have a component I call a server client. It's a really confusing component. It doesn't know what it is until it loads. So if you see a red box, it means that the server client component thinks it runs on the client. If it's a green box, it thinks it runs on the server. So here I have like the server client, which is the box you see here, is still on the server because it's green. I have the client component here, which runs on the client because that is a client component. And I have in the file is a use client directory on it. And that instantiate a server client component. That one is still red because now the client component instantiated this server this component, making that a client component as well. But as you saw up here, I'm passing in 3 components in a way, or one with one nested one, and those are still run on the server. So that's a really useful pattern to keep your bundle size small and application fast. And instantiation. This was something that did not, I mean, it existed, but there was no framework or anything that available of us when we started using Next.js app router. We started doing app router as soon as it was available, and none of the existing framework actually solved this in a good way for app router. And it's a little bit problematic because we don't have instantiation in that sense, where you have like the same site with different languages, because we wanted to have different markets. We had all the different countries, and in theory, and the country could also have different languages. We don't have that at the moment, but they are. Someone asks that we should have like English in Norway, etc. So it's a lot of different scenarios. And to solve this in a way, we still have like a couple of requirements. All our pages, independent of which country you are visiting, should always be static. Otherwise, like, we should be able to cache every single page. And the app is one app serving all these countries, but we want the pages to be cacheable. And to do that, you can use the middleware. As mentioned before, middleware, we're running on Vercel at least, they're running on the edge, basically where also the cache lives, so we can there decide which route to actually render. Because the application route that you see in the actual folder tree can be different from the route that you see in the browser, because you can rewrite everything in the middleware to match your application routes. And a small demo like for this, I have here. This is a really simple application where I just render different flags. We can take France, for example, since that's where we are, and Sweden, because I'm Swedish. And the fun part here is this is all running on the same URL. But if I would open the network tab on this one, you will see that I get a cache hit on this one, even though it's like dynamically rendered. And that is for me. So if you would go to the same URL and visit me, say, another language, it will actually render statically. And that's basically because we, in this request, we in the middleware are looking at what are you trying to do. If you're trying to go to a specific language, we're going to take that language code and save that as a cookie, and then redirect you to the actual page, and then serve this page based on the cookie value instead. And we don't do exactly this in our application, but this is based on this premise, I would say. Next part, feature toggling. I think this ties really well into the middleware, because as for the whole instantiation bits, the feature toggling still wants the page to be static and cacheable, even though we toggle different features on and off. So we need to solve this as well in the middleware. And what we are doing is actually reading all the feature toggles in the middleware and encoding them to a really weird string that the base 16.4 encoded and minimized a lot. And then we're adding that to a segment of our route. So that segment can help us to make the page cacheable. And one thing that's good to know, that there are limits to how long the paths can be when you have different segments. Don't ask me how we know, but we had some weird toggles in production on and off for some time. I do recommend actually not building this yourself as we did. There is a flag SDK that Vercel has open source now, I think, that you can use outside Vercel. And we will probably migrate to that as well, but our solution still works. But it's super good. And also, if you run on Vercel, it really also ties into the Vercel toolbar really well on how you do it. So here we have the Vercel toolbar. And I can showcase like simple features. I'm not sure why I can't click it. Limited. I'm on hobby plan, so I can't toggle enough. This worked like 10 minutes ago. I should complain that I should get a premium for free. Okay, you have to trust me. I can actually show because we do have it on here on our site. So this is the real deal. So if I go here and go into features, we can do a debug mode. So this is super helpful for us in applications. So this is actually sometimes we do a lot, because now we can turn on debug mode and it will again statically render the site. We get some debug information like which CMS content it is. We can see the queries that you can see here that pass down to the product filters to our search engine, etc. So we're using these feature toggles to a lot of different things. And for some reason, the toolbar disappears when you select the toggle the first time. So this is something that we use a lot. And all this still makes the site static. We read this based on the cookie values in the middleware and generate the unique experience for that user. And that's something we most likely use to personalize the experience for the users also going forward. Like if you are a gaming customer, for example, you might get a gaming experience in a static way. So even though we are trying to make it dynamic, that should not come at the cost of performance. Server actions, let's do that. I mean, a lot of drama, I think, when server actions was announced. I really don't understand why, because, I mean, it's just an abstraction over API routes, so you don't have to write them yourself. We don't use them a ton, but I think they are helpful when we need them. And it just helps you don't have to write all the code yourself. And I mean, it's super simple. Again, a super simple application. Nothing here runs on the client, basically. But you see, like, name cannot be empty. As soon as I write something here, it takes 2 seconds, and then it's going to pop up, and hello, Tomas. And you can also bind it directly to a button, if you like. So server actions, I have that demo here. And it's super simple. For a form, you can bind it to the action. Of course, you can. This is like the simplest possible version, almost. You can make it slightly simpler if you want to. I have my actions in the separate folder file because I think that makes more sense. So the only thing you need to do is put it to the action and then handle it from there. And then you need to write the API route or whatever. And for the client button, you can bind the function directly to the on-click, or call it from the function that you bind to the on-click. Caching. That's fun. It's actually one of the, I think, super hard problems to solve in a good way. I think we managed to do it pretty well now. It has been a confusing couple of years, I would say. First with Next.13, when Next.js hijacked fetch to some degree. And then in Next.14, they changed their mind. So now they haven't hijacked fetch anymore. I think they did it with good intentions. It's not that they want to be evil or anything. They wanted to try to help customer cache by default in a way. I didn't like it personally because that changed the semantic of how it actually worked, which was somewhat annoying. But when you do caching, you can have things cached like for a time period or forever, and then you can have sort of tags if you like to invalidate caching based on events. I really recommend if you're going to buy like a site with a lot of customers, go down the route where you can invalidate the pages based on the events. That will make life a lot easier, because I've seen some inconsistencies from time to time. If you have like a page making like 5, 10 different fetch calls, and they all might have different revalidation times, what should the timing be on the page? It's super hard to know. So if you can instead switch everything around and base it on revalidation tags and revalidate pages based on event, would definitely help. Portrait rendering and streaming. Aurora was actually mentioning some of this. This is one of the big features that I really looking forward to. We're not using it at the moment because you need to be on the calendar release to use portrait rendering. Streaming you can do today, but if you're going to do streaming, the whole page will be dynamic. And as I mentioned before, I don't want to have dynamic pages, but if I want to serve a static experience that I can cache on the edge for performance reasons. But with portrait rendering, that will change. So here I have a page somewhat similar to Aurora's, but much simpler. But what you see here is actually now where the second box will start being cached. And you can actually combine portrait rendering and the suspense. So I have a suspense around the right box as well. So the first time it will actually, or when I click here, it will sort of stream in. But after that first time, it will be part of the cached response. And for an e-commerce site, this is going to be super useful. Because when we have a portrait rendering, we can start serving sort of listing pages where we show the whole outer skeleton, and then we can stream in the filter, stream in the result in the first render, making it very SEO friendly and also performant. And then we can take over on the client to make the filtering fast. So this is one of the features I'm really looking forward to. So some of the Vercel features that we are using a lot. We are, of course, using their deployments. I think this is one of the gateway drugs, in my opinion. We built a similar thing before, or I was in the sort of building the infrastructure for the old site, and we built something where we could deploy pre-release versions or whatever, but it was nothing near what you get from Vercel. Having the possibility to just click on and deploy 2 weeks back and see what it looked like is very, very powerful. And the speed, the insight, not the score, but just having this dashboard available to you. You don't have to wait 2 weeks or 28 days. I think that's the score you have on page speed insight. Here you can actually see the impact, not in real time, but within an hour or two, you can actually start seeing how did one of my changes actually impact our metrics, or if something went really wrong. So speed insight is very useful. And we also got access really early, but now it's available for everyone, what's called environments. So here, when we want to try something, we can set up a specific environment. We are mainly using production and preview and the development, of course, but you can create your own custom environment that makes the management of all the variables much easier. And we also have one feature that I not have a list, and that's basically the toolbar. The toolbar is super useful because you both have the toggles there. You can use it because I have a feature for commenting, but we are not using that at the moment because there were too many comments. So we stopped using that. But for us, feature toggling is the main thing. But you also have accessibility tools, I think, where you can, I'm limited now, but you can show accessibility issues on the site is shown in the toolbar, and they can show you where you have layout shifts, etc. So to summarize, Change in large organization is definitely hard, but possible. You might need to just have the right approach. It's super important to have both the people, but also the tech to need to align. I mean, you can't fight the technology. That's going to be super hard to build a performant application. And as I mentioned, you need to know what is the characteristics, both the problem as a whole, but also when you're focusing down on specific problems within your space. That's very important. And I think Next.js, for me, is actually lets me focus on building the application. I didn't need to think about build system or build pipelines or whatever. I can just focus on building application. And Vercel solves the same problem, but on the infrastructure level as Next.js. So I don't have to think about the infrastructure. I can just do git commit, git push, and it's deployed. And that's how I like it. And with that, thank you.